All right, let's jump right in. When you think about the Bible, the whole thing, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, it's easy to see it as a collection of different books. But what if I told you it's really one single epic story? The big question is, what's that story all about?
Think about it. If you had to distill everything, all those laws, the poetry, the crazy prophecies, the history, what's the one single thread that ties it all together? It sounds like a huge question, right? But the answer, the core idea, is surprisingly simple and focused.
It's a rescue mission. That's it. From page 1 to the very end, the Bible is telling one grand story. God's plan to rescue his people and restore his creation. It's this incredible, sprawling rescue mission.
Okay, so like any great rescue story, you've got to understand two things first: the original plan and the problem that made the rescue necessary. So, in the beginning, the plan was, perfect. God creates humanity, Adam and Eve, to be his image bearers, basically his representatives on earth. And their job? It was to spread his goodness and presence everywhere, to fill the whole creation with it, all while living in this perfect, unbroken relationship with him.
But they failed, and it wasn't a small mistake. Sin enters the story, and the fallout is absolutely catastrophic. They're exiled from the garden, cut off from the very presence of God. And right there, that's it. That's the central problem that kicks off the entire rescue mission.
So that leaves us with this huge question, right? How is God going to fix this? How is he going to restore his plan? Well, the next chapter of the story gives us a clue, and it starts with a brand new group of people, the nation of Israel.
And what's so fascinating here is you start to see a pattern emerge. It's almost like a replay. God chooses Israel to pick up where Adam left off, to be the ones to finally restore the plan. But guess what happens? Just like Adam, they fail. And just like Adam, they end up in exile. It's this heartbreaking, repeating cycle.
Yeah, check out these parallels. It's almost a mirror image. Adam's task was to spread God's rule from the garden. Israel's was to be a light to the nations. Both failed because of disobedience, and both got the exact same result: exile. Getting this pattern is so important because it really unlocks the whole story of the Old Testament.
So here's the bottom line. Humanity tried twice and failed twice. It really seems like the plan is totally broken, which leaves you hanging, right? How on earth is God's promise ever going to be fulfilled now?
And this is where the story takes its most dramatic turn. Because God doesn't just give up and throw the plan away. There's no plan C. Instead, he does something incredible. He enters the story himself.
You've probably heard this verse from the Christmas story. It's the angel talking to Joseph, telling him about this baby. His name will be Jesus. Why? Because, and this is the key, he will save his people from their sins. He's coming to solve the one problem that started this whole mess.
So how does Jesus pull this off? Well, he doesn't start a new plan. He's the one who finally fulfills the original plan. He lives the perfect life that Adam and Israel couldn't. He effectively becomes the faithful Israelite, and then he dies to pay the price for their failure, for our failure. And through his resurrection, he throws the doors wide open for God's blessing to finally reach all nations, just like it was supposed to from the very beginning. Okay, so that's the grand narrative, the story of the rescue. But let's get practical. What does this salvation actually mean? What did Jesus do? The New Testament gives us a few powerful metaphors or images to help us wrap our minds around it.
First up, we have this idea of redemption. And this is a word straight out of the ancient marketplace. It literally means to buy something back, to pay a price to set someone or something free from being enslaved.
And this idea wasn't new. It has deep, deep roots in Israel's story. Think about the Exodus. That's the ultimate story of God redeeming his people from slavery in Egypt. So when the New Testament talks about Jesus' death on the cross, it's presented as the ultimate redemption price, the payment that frees us from our slavery to sin and death.
All right, the second big idea is forgiveness. And we're not just talking about saying, oh, it's okay. This is way deeper. It's actually the fulfillment of this amazing promise from the prophet Jeremiah, way back in the Old Testament. He looked forward to a day when God would make a new covenant with his people, and part of that deal was that God would totally forgive their sins and, get this, choose to not even remember them anymore.
And that's exactly what Jesus does. His death on the cross kicks off this new covenant. His sacrifice is what makes this kind of complete, slate-wiped clean forgiveness possible. It's like he hits the undo button on the consequences of sin from Genesis 3.
Okay, our third image is a big one.
justification. And this one is a legal term. Picture a courtroom. Now, the key distinction here is super important. Justification isn't about God zapping you and making you a perfect person. It's about God, the judge, declaring you righteous. It's a legal verdict. It's what the judge says about you that matters.
So what that means is our whole legal status before God changes. It's not based on our performance or how good we've been. It's based entirely on our faith in what Jesus did. And because of that, God looks at us and declares the verdict, not guilty. This idea was a complete game changer for the Apostle Paul. You see it all over his letters, especially in Romans and Galatians.
Okay, so this brings us to a final point, and it's a bit of a mind-bender, but it's super important for understanding the Christian life. See, salvation isn't just a thing that happened in the past. It's something we live in right now, in this really interesting tension.
Now, theologians have a fancy term for this, inaugurated eschatology. Sounds complicated, but all it means is that the future has already started. The amazing blessings of the end times, of God's final rescue, are here right now, but they're not fully here yet. It's like a movie trailer. You get a taste of the amazing ending, but you haven't seen the whole film yet.
And this really breaks it down for us. On the one hand, we have already been rescued. We've been pulled from darkness, made alive with Christ, forgiven, justified. That's a done deal. But on the other hand, we are not yet home. We're still waiting for our bodies to be fully redeemed. We still have to deal with a world that is broken and groaning. We're living in this in-between time, this overlap of the ages.
So when we pull it all together, this epic story of rescue that stretches from a garden in Genesis all the way to a restored creation in Revelation, it leaves us with one really powerful question to chew on. If salvation really is this grand rescue, then what does it look like to live like you've been rescued?